Hey there, friends. Tracey here, wanting to review the 2022 scoring season feedback statements for C4. I met with and reviewed 25 different score reports from all different certificate areas, and I compiled it all together to kind of see a pattern of what assessors are seeing and what they're not seeing. And so what they're not seeing is what they gave the feedback statements on. So I want to make sure that we review that now. Again, this is only C4. I've done this already for C2 and C3. If you need to see those, they're just in different videos. All right, so from 25 score reports, you see on the right-hand side the number of times this particular feedback statement was given to a candidate. And so it is from the greatest lack of, the assessor seeing it, to the least on my page here. Also notice that the yellow is the actual thing that you should have done or that candidate should have done that they didn't see evidence of. The orange showcases two, in this case, feedback statements that really came on the 3-4 rubric. So these are teachers who provided clear evidence. They provided up to the 3 mark, but they couldn't get to the 4 because of these feedback statements. They were the most popular feedback statements for holding candidates back. Well, and I take this back too, because sometimes candidates that scored like a 2.75 got these. So they couldn't even get to the 3 because of these orange statements. So they're going to be really important for us to look at. And they will sometimes overlap. So I want to go over to the scoring guide first, which is page 40 of your scoring guide for the national board. And I want to look at this in a color-coded realm, and then we'll come back and discuss them. So these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are your pillars for the national board. These are the things that you have to be able to do. Commit that you're committed to students and learning, you know the subjects you teach, you're responsible for managing and monitoring student learning, you think systematically about your practice and learn from experience, which is that being diagnostic that I always talk about in my courses, and being a member of a learning community, which is crucial for you to do that here in Component 4. All right, now blue is the color that I want you to hone in on and pay very close attention to here. This is because the majority of candidates got these feedback statements. That means the assessors are struggling mightily to find clear evidence, because we're on right now the 2 scoring rubric, right here, score level 2. When candidates got a 2, they were not able to find these things in blue more often than not. They were not able to find them. So those are going to be crucial, and you're going to see them on my board up here. These top statements here are the ones that are in blue here. I'm going to have these down below this video, so you'll be able to get this actual document as well with the colors. Now, the things in green, those were probably midway down in my document, still important, didn't happen to all the candidates, but notable enough that I want you to really pay attention to it, whether you're retaking or it's your first time with this C4, because this is where the assessors really need to see you making connections back to your evidence so they can give you credit. Making connections through your writing back to your evidence. All right, the things in yellow happened very few times. It's probably not even notable for you to look at, but it did happen a couple of times, and we'll talk about it over on the other form. In this one, you may wish to review the instructions to ensure you follow the directions for developing and submitting the entry. More often than not, candidates got this, well, for 3 different reasons. Number 1, they provided multiple assessments, like more than one formative, more than one summative, when they only wanted one of each, or they didn't use enough kids. They only had like 1 or 2 kids that they used in the entry instead of the whole group, whatever a group would be for you. Or they were missing forms. They just didn't put all their forms together. It's a beast of an entry to put together, and they just didn't put it together right. And the assessors were bumbling around. So instantly they took them down to a 2 because of that. So this is not something you want to get. You really want to follow directions and all of that. Candidates, that are doing very menial things like, the margin might be at a 0.80 or a 0.7 or something like that. No, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the fact that the assessor is struggling to read this because there is too much of something or not enough or that type of thing. That's where you get this from. All right, so this is your, again, score level 2 rubric. The majority of candidates that I looked at, their score reports, had a 2 on this entry. And so the majority of feedback statements came off of this. Notice the things that aren't colored, most candidates did fine on. At least these 25 did. Nobody got that feedback statement. Now, when we go over to the score level 3, which out of the 25, I think 4 of those candidates got a 3 or above, 3 to a 3.75, because you don't get any feedback statements if you get a 3.75 or a 4. And then 2 of them got a 4. So that's 5 total. That 20 of them were on the 2, 20 out of the 25. So here you're noticing that in the 3 to the 4 range, they got this one, just like an average thing. Just pay attention to it if you're in the 3-4 realm. And this one you saw in both. You saw it on the 2 and you saw it on the 3 rubric. So this is something to really hone into that's red there. And notice it's red here. And this comes for you guys in your PLN and SLN. PLN and SLN, that's where this is scored at. So it came on both of those for you guys. All right, and then before I go back to this feedback thing, I want to say really quick too, that it's important to note that a score of 2.75 is the lowest rubric score in the range of clear evidence for the accomplished teaching practice through the national board. So I know that the national board says you have to have at least a 1.75, but when we have a 1.75 on both C1 and the portfolio entries and we still don't see fireworks, that's because we have to get closer to the 2.75 range to get to the 110. And notably, you have only 2 retake attempts for each component. You can't just keep retaking C4, C4, C4. Also note, C4 is not worth very much in the scheme of things and the amount of work you put into it, right? So if you're coming out of C4 and you didn't score quite as good as you wanted to, and you scored on this 2 rubric, you really may want to say, I did the very best I could. I really followed the feedback statements and the rubric and the standards, and I got a 2. That's when you may want to, if you need to retake another portfolio, definitely look at C3 first because it's worth 30% of the score, but then go back and look at C2 over C4. Okay. All right. So let's go back over to these C4 statements. Again, I've ordered these by most often seen. 15 out of the 20. Remember, 20 of the 25 were on the 2.0 rubric. 15 of them got this feedback statement. The 7 here and the 3 here. Remember, I had 3 of them that were at the 3 to the 4 range. They all got this feedback statement. And then the 7 would be some of these in the 2 range got a 2.75. So they were 2.75, remember, is proficient. So they're going over to the 4 range. All of that probably just muddied the water for you. Let's just read and see what they mean. To assess the progress of a class as a whole, as well as individual students, and to adjust instruction as needed to improve student learning. This comes with your unit of instruction. So you have to provide the evidence that your formative, your self-assessments, and your summative collectively, when you're writing and analyzing from those assessments, You've got to showcase the fact that you're able to see the progress that they're making as a whole group and individually, and that you're adjusting through this unit because of the formative assessment and the self-assessment data you're gathering to get to the end all with the summative. And so it's so hard. It's super hard to think about. And oh my gosh, wait, all this stuff connects? Holy cow, I don't know. Like it seems so disjointed, but you think about it as a connected unit where we're testing you on, do you understand that assessment drives instruction? That's what we're testing you on in the first part of C4. Declare evidence of knowledge of your students' analysis and discussion of prior year student assessment data, collected observational data, and relevant information obtained from family and colleagues. 14 people got that. Here's what often happens. You collect all this wonderful, beautiful data. You put it in these evidence pages. You're so proud of it. It looks amazing. And then you don't even talk about it. Like it's just over on the evidence pages. You just think, oh, the assessors are going to see it. No, biggest word here, most important word here is right there. Analysis and discussion. So you have to analyze what you put over on that evidence document. Can't just put it over there and think the assessor's going to see it and be like, oh, that's wonderful. They don't have a checklist. They're looking for your analysis. That's why this statement is so popular for the assessors to ding people. Well, ding is not the word because they really are scoring supportively, but they can't find it because you're not analyzing. 14 out of 20 people are not doing that. Student use of feedback and class assessment data impact your instructions approach as students work toward defined instructional goals. Biggest problem here is goals. People are not defining their instructional goals very well, or it's not weaving in and out of the feedback and the assessment data. It's like we're collecting assessment data, but it doesn't necessarily directly align to the goals that you set for the unit. And then some people aren't even putting student feedback on their student self-assessments. You have to put feedback to students on those self-assessments there. So 12 out of the 20 got that statement for a variety of reasons. Professional learning in which you engage enables you to improve your ability to support student growth. So a lot of times people are talking about their professional learning, but it's from the lens of my district made me do this. And you're talking about what you learned and how you grew, but you're not connecting it to how your students are growing because of you growing. You have to connect the students' growth to your growth, and you have to prove it with your evidence. That is why people are getting that. That's what we call your PLN. And I talk about that in depth with the course as well. My C4 course called Assessment Drives Instruction, where you build your portfolio. Select or create assessments for formative and summative purposes. Okay, so many times teachers are not utilizing formative assessments and summative assessments that are aligning to their goals, and that are appropriate to their students or subjects. They're just picking something out of the blue, or they're seeing somebody else on Facebook that used something and they're like, oh, this worked for them, I'm going to use it. No, it's got to be appropriate to what you're doing in your unit, your students, and your goals. So it just because it worked for another teacher and they got a 4.0, you could easily get a 2.0 because you don't see the connection. You don't understand how that formative assessment is informing your practice, informing your next steps in this unit. And the summative might not always come back to the formative in a connection. All right, you may wish to find clearer evidence that you use multiple methods for measuring students' growth and understanding that you can explain student performance to others. So it's mostly this ending part. You can explain student performance to others. The depth of explaining how students are performing isn't always there. It's just kind of surface. Like you depend on your charts and graphs and everything on the evidence to speak for themselves, instead of telling the assessor, explaining their performance to the assessor. And multiple methods for measuring students' growth, that comes if teachers use the same formative tool and assess and summative, or, many times on the self-assessment, teachers will use the exact same self-assessment for all three kids, and which is fine, perfectly fine. But then the feedback is not differentiated. It's not even helping basically the course of the unit. Engage in reflective thinking about your assessment practices and how they are informed by student learning. So again, you have to get in the reflective mindset. If you don't engage reflectively and analytically about how your formative to your student self-assessments to your summative, how it really told you about what your students were learning and what they still needed to know, then that's where you're going to get that feedback statement if you're not able to do that. Consistent and convincing evidence. These are the people who scored the 275 or above. Apply knowledge gathered about the students when establishing learning goals and when planning instructions. So some of you that were in the 2 range did not get this feedback statement because you did this really well. You gathered all of the stuff in the group profile and you established your learning goals from that. And your planning of your unit came from that. Kudos to you. If you didn't get this feedback statement and you're on a 2, then you did that super well. There are people who scored a 3 because they did these other things, maybe better, who didn't do that well or good enough. You may wish to provide clear evidence that you critically examine your practice to deepen your knowledge, expand your repertoire, and incorporate new findings. So not too many people are getting this. Mostly this is coming when your PLN and your SLN are just kind of laissez-faire, status quo. So it's not necessarily coming to more than about 4 there. So I'm not going to give a lot of the discussion to that. Also, remember what I told you about following the directions and developing the entry. I've already talked about that. Collaborating in learning communities to build upon your teaching practice and improve student learning. Again, that goes back to your PLN and SLN and your collaboration that you have with others and that you prove. And same thing here. The 2.75 to the 4 range got it, and so did people in the 2 range. They got that same thing. So make sure that your PLN and SLN here, and here, plus critically examining your practice, all of that is coming around those 2 pages of the C4. Okay, so I have done this for C2. I've unpacked this for C3 as well. If you haven't already seen it and you need it, go over and see it and look at it. And I appreciate your time. If you're not in my assessment drives instruction course, check it out. It's at traceybryantstuckey.com. I would love to have you. And I also have a think tank where I see teachers live every other week during the season to discuss C4 or C3, either one, whichever think tank you're in. It's really super fun. I hope you got something out of this. Bye now.